This is a special episode of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Michelle Garcia Holmes, somebody who is a friend of the Rio Grande Foundation and ran for office for Congressional District 1 and is running currently for that revised congressional district. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for having me on today.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to have you, and hopefully this interview, and we talked to Luis Sanchez last week. We did reach out to Melanie Stansbury. No word yet on the incumbent, but you have a primary coming up for this race as a Republican in June. And, I just want to give these candidates, give candidates in some of these primaries an opportunity to really explain what they value, a little bit about themselves, their history, and what they want to do as a representative in this congressional district. So I appreciate your willingness to take time to do that. And without further ado, Michelle, I know you are a retired Albuquerque police officer, but there's a lot more to you than that. So let's find out a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Well, I've lived in New Mexico all my life, Paul, and I'm married to Earl Holmes. That's where the Holmes comes from. And we raised 5 children here. They're all grown and very self-sufficient, which is something I'm very proud of.
How many of them stuck around?
Well, yeah, that's the sad story of New Mexico, right? We lose our children to other states that have more opportunity. My son is in the United States Army. He's in the Special Forces, and he's assigned to Fort Bragg. We believe he's been deployed to Poland right now, so quite concerned about him, but yeah. I don't think he has a choice on whether he lives in New Mexico or not. But I have a daughter in Portland, Oregon. She is a doctor of pharmacy, and she chose to move and leave New Mexico, and that makes us quite sad. And then my other son, our eldest son, he lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. He left New Mexico for more opportunity as well because he saw that there was just Arizona is thriving. All of the states surrounding us are thriving much more than New Mexico, which is really sad. And then I still have two daughters here. One is a mom, and she actually has a degree in business and accounting. And my other daughter is a school teacher at a local charter school here. So we're glad to have at least 2 here still.
Yeah.
However, starting out in the Albuquerque Police Department in 1984, I have watched changes over the years, and I actually officially retired from the New Mexico Attorney General's office under the King administration. But my career goes way back, 30 years commissioned policewoman. I started out in uniform patrol, threw on a Kevlar vest every day, threw on that dark blue polyester uniform, threw the gun belt on, grabbed my shotgun, and jumped in my patrol car and answered calls for service for 10 years on several different shifts. Worked in the International District, which we called back then was the war zone. A very tough district to work in, but I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed the people. And, I worked swing shift, split shift, and graveyard shift. And you would see the kids, walking to school in the morning while I'm on my way home. And it's just a tough neighborhood. But I saw a lot of good people in that neighborhood trying to make a difference, trying to make their neighborhood better. And I think that's just always been a problem in New Mexico is we've always tried to make it better, but it seems like we get a lot of pushback, right? And there's a lot of corruption in New Mexico. I served in several different places in the Albuquerque Police Department. I was a detective in property crimes, a detective in violent crimes, and ultimately retired out of crimes against children. And if you ask me what some of the problems are in New Mexico, I think it's when we dissect what's going on in New Mexico, and then we take it over to the state legislature, that's where we hit the brick wall. the changes are not, the legislative changes that we need are not happening as swiftly as they should. And then you tie corruption into that, which is something I worked on after I retired from the Albuquerque Police Department. I went over to the Attorney General's office, worked under the King administration. Gary King wanted to start a government corruption division, and so I helped him achieve that. Went to the legislature, got funding, hired our prosecutors, hired our special agents, cross-trained them with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI so that we could start to take on some of the government corruption in our state. I also worked on legislation, 8 legislative sessions working on the first human trafficking bill for the New Mexico, toughening up our child abuse laws, working on our domestic violence laws, working on water issues. We had a water utility and government issue. We had a consumer division where we helped consumers who, hit a brick wall, ran into problems in our community. We had a Court of Appeals division. We had the prosecutorial divisions. We just didn't have the government corruption investigative division standing alone. We had another prosecutorial division as well. So we had several divisions. I got to work with 80 attorneys, which I always say that was quite the achievement, on a daily basis. And I oversaw, being chief of staff, oversaw our civilian staff and worked very closely with our special agents on our Internet Crimes Against Children division. I also was the legislative liaison for the office, so I would travel to Washington, D.C. on special projects to retrieve funding for some of the special projects. We had an anti-methamphetamine project. We wanted to get help our farmers and ranchers because their chemicals were being stolen on a regular basis to produce methamphetamine. So we also worked with the Native American community to educate, parents, and we also worked on this statewide of the dangers of methamphetamine and how to spot the use and the drug itself. And then we also worked on opioid issues, and child predator issues. I want to talk about this just a little bit too, because we trained over 10,000 law enforcement officers in rural communities and cities in our state on how to investigate child predator crimes. And we also got them the very best equipment so that they could be successful when prosecuting these type of offenders. The other thing that I'm really proud of working on, because we have such a huge border issue right now, is I worked collaboratively with Arizona's Attorney General's office, and we worked collaboratively on money laundering issues because the drug cartels are operating freely in New Mexico. We wanted to go after their money. They were also plaguing Arizona as well. So got to work on that issue as well. So as you can see,
a long track record of being involved in policy issues and trying to do things for our state, and especially focusing here on Albuquerque area, but definitely around the state. So you ran for Congress not quite 2 years ago, but the last cycle.
In 2020, yes.
Yeah. And this was a district that was, traditionally that Albuquerque seat had been held by Heather Wilson. It has moved to the left politically, in many ways, at least moving into that election. It had moved pretty hard to the left. So it had become a safe Democrat seat with very, very left-wing progressive folks like Deb Haaland and Melanie Stansbury. But here we have redistricting. The Democrats looking to come after Yvette Harrell for sure.
Right.
Really split up southern New Mexico and expanded CD1, the district you're running for in the primary, into Lincoln County and south to Ruidoso and those areas, as well as reworking the other 2 districts. But I've got to think that based on this new map that you feel a lot more confident that if you can win the primary, that you can take down Melanie Stansbury, especially given the current political climate. So just talk about the way you
Sure.
see those changes to that district.
Absolutely, Paul. This is a winnable district now, especially with a candidate like me. So let's circle back to the 2020 election. I challenged Deb Haaland. We ran during COVID. Right. So you got to think about what kind of campaign can you run during COVID? A lot of campaigning is reaching out to the voters. We were all shuttered in place. People were staying home. People weren't going to events. It was difficult to campaign. But even with the difficulties of campaigning during the 2020 election, I garnered more votes in history of any Republican in that district, that outlying district, when I challenged Deb Haaland. We got all of our possible Republican voters and then anywhere from 35 to 40,000 crossover votes. And what I mean by crossover votes is conservative Democrats and independents that liked my platform. My platform has always been a very common sense approach platform on fixing issues in New Mexico. And I think they liked it. So now with that consideration, I believe, we're running in a new district. And some of the same district as before. And what I mean by that is we have now garnered, through redistricting, all of the city of Rio Rancho, the north side of Roswell, the entire area of Lincoln County, the entire area of Edgewood, whereas we had portions of Edgewood before. And Edgewood falls in Santa Fe County, going all the way up to Stanley, New Mexico. We did very well, 3-1. 3-1 in Torrance County. We actually did very well in Bernalillo County with our crossover votes. So as you can see, as I'm explaining redistricting in the new district, you can see we've got a much more Republican district. We're within what we're seeing 5 to 6 percentage points to close the gap, and that's within striking distance with our type of campaign and because of the fact that I get crossover votes. We did lose the entire South Valley and Southwest Mesa area, which is a difficult area to campaign in, highly Democratic. But we did very well in that district, and I believe because, circling back, our common sense messaging, people want issues like crime resolved. And I shared with you some of our survey, the top 3 issues that came back when we surveyed District 1. We did a sprinkling survey of Republican voters. The top 3 issues that come back are the border, inflation, and crime. And I really feel like I'm the right candidate for the right time because these are issues that I've always worked on. And I circle back to the inflation issue because I grew up during the Jimmy Carter days. I totally get inflation. I totally get that we need smaller government. We need lower taxes. We need to start making better decisions because people are going to start encountering that they're going to have difficulty finding jobs. They're going to be making decisions. Do I buy a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk? I raised 5 kids in this district, and I consider myself a fiscal conservative because of that. When you raise 5 kids, you have to buy, in all different ages, you have to buy a lot of things for them, especially when they're involved in sports and school. And, I think we need to be running our government a little bit of the same, with the same mentality. Smaller government definitely, I think, would benefit Americans.
Well, before we get on to some of the specific things that you're running on, I'll ask you flat out, which is why are you the superior candidate to defeat Melanie Stansbury? Because ultimately, that's what this is all about. This is about, having a second, presumably, representative from New Mexico who is more of the conservative ilk, but you've got to get to through a primary first. So why are you the best person for that?
Sure. Well, experience. I believe experience matters. I have legislative experience. I have experience in doing the hard things. It wasn't easy passing the first human trafficking bill for the state of New Mexico. Having that legislative experience and discernment, I'll share with you, we use this slogan, proven experienced effective, proven effective experienced. And we use that slogan in the campaign because we want to share with voters the fact that right now, we are in such dire times. 72% of our kids are on Medicaid. We want a congressperson who is going to go to Washington and fight for our needs here in New Mexico. Having lived here all my life, having the experiences under my belt that I've had, and then having that legislative experience where I can hit the ground running in Washington, D.C. and work on the issues that are important to New Mexico. That border issue is a huge crisis right now. And, President Biden lifting Title 42, letting hundreds of thousands of people come across the border. We're having some really, really big problems, Paul, with not, I think, doing proper identification on these individuals coming across the border. So if you want someone that's going to hit the ground running, make every effort to secure our southern border, work on the crime problem and the drug cartels, start putting a stop to fentanyl coming to New Mexico, poisoning our children, working on the inflation issue, fighting for smaller government, lower taxes, someone who's going to help our veterans and our seniors. Let me tell you this, I'm a mother of a soldier. I care about our veterans. I'm a daughter of a veteran. I helped my dad get his veterans benefits. This is what your congressperson should be doing in Washington, D.C. Well, I'm challenging Melanie Stansbury because, she believes the biggest priority in New Mexico is climate change. I believe some of the biggest priorities in New Mexico are, hey, lower taxes, smaller government, lower gas prices. My gosh, like I said before, people are having to make a decision, buy a gallon of milk, buy a gallon of gas. We have the whole Permian Basin here. We need to start tapping into our natural resources, lifting regulations, start releasing these land leases. The Biden administration would rather buy oil from Venezuela, other foreign countries. We were well on our way. America was energy independent. They shut down the Keystone Pipeline. We need to release the oil that's coming through the Keystone Pipeline. New Mexico, really, with all of our natural resources, we should be thriving. But we need a new set of eyes out there in Washington that's going to actually speak on behalf of the people. And I think I'm that person. I have the experience. I'm very effective, and I'm proven. I'm battle tested. I mean, I've been out there working in the war zone and working in the legislature.
Very similar environments, I might add. So you've already obviously talked fairly extensively about things that you plan on doing. What specific policies do you think need to be implemented, and what specific legislation would you get behind that would accomplish some of these goals, either things that you would introduce yourself or policies that are introduced by others to address some of these problems?
Yeah, one thing I'd really like to do is serve on certain committees. I'd love to serve on Veterans Affairs. I just kind of explained why. I used to go with my dad to all his doctor's appointments. I helped him get his benefits all the way up to 100%. It took us 3 years. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. So we need more advocacy for our veterans. Number 2, the border issue. We need a good common sense immigration reform, and I will definitely, hopefully, work collaboratively with my fellow congresswomen. I mean, I know Alexis Martinez Johnson has a tremendous opportunity winning in District 3. Yvette Harrell still has a tremendous opportunity for winning in District 1. I think us 3 women working collaboratively in Washington, D.C. could get a lot of good bills passed for the state of New Mexico, especially on immigration reform. We need to tighten up, the bills, chain migration. Just because you're born here, you become a citizen.
Now, let me jump in on that. On the issue of immigration, so I want to separate. We had someone who was a Border Patrol chief under President Trump recently. And
Rodney Scott.
yeah,
yes.
he really made a point of separating the issue of border security from immigration itself.
Right.
How would you describe your more immigration policy side of things? Are you generally pro-immigrants? Are you pro-work visas and that kind of thing? What's your flesh out the border a little bit?
Sure. I am definitely pro work visas. Look, we've got industries here where we need workers. We've got farms, the pecan farms, Meckenbreyer, he's got thousands of acres of pecan farms in Hatch area. We've got our chili farms. Definitely want to be supportive of our farming and ranching community because they're always in need of workers. Our restaurant community, same thing. I've talked to dozens of restaurant owners. There are people who won't go back to work, and our restaurant owners are suffering from a lack of people wanting to come back to work. So definitely, let's bring in immigrants to help come alongside our industries and support our New Mexico industries that can really be thriving. But at the same time, we don't want drug cartels to be coming across the border and operating freely. That is a huge problem for New Mexico. And we need to tighten up our people, we already have laws in place to become naturalized citizens. I'm not against immigration. We're all immigrants if you look at that. My family, I have a background where, we came from Spain, Toledo, Spain. That's where my grandfather came from. He came to New Mexico. He became a rancher in the Vaughan Pastura area. We're all immigrants. So I totally get that. I'm not anti-immigrant. However, I am anti-drug cartel. And let me just pair that with the other half of protecting the homeland. I want to serve on the Homeland Security Committee because I believe with my law enforcement background, what I bring to the table are ideas and, experience in how we can deal with drug cartels that are poisoning our communities. We have the I-25, I-40 corridor. We need to be working collaboratively with our local law enforcement and DEA, FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and really start buckling down and going after these drug cartels. Our Border Patrol agents need to be fully funded. I want to share with you a story on our way to Ruidoso recently. The Border Patrol was in a high-speed chase. The offenders were going northbound in the southbound lanes of I-25. We were stopped at by a Socorro police officer. My husband and I, we were, headed to Ruidoso to go campaign, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Border Patrol's in a high-speed chase with some people that I guess they ran the checkpoint." And he said, "They're headed right for us." And I said, "Well, we better say a quick prayer." I said, "Well, said a quick prayer, safety for the officers, that we catch these offenders and whatnot." But these guys know no bounds. I mean, they were running from state police were involved, local law enforcement, border agents. They were causing mayhem, possibly injuring officers and innocent individuals. Eventually, they rolled the car probably about a quarter mile from where we were. Of course, I told the officer, I said, Go get them. They're all going to run out and bail out of the car and run. So he turned around and caught the guys. Eventually, end of story, they were all taken into custody. But I'll tell you, they know no bounds. They have no fears. We've got to make sure our Border Patrol agents aren't having to buy baby bottles and diapers at the border. They have a job to do. They're law enforcement. We need to make sure they're doing their job and have the tools and equipment and funding to do their job. We're just seeing a lot of things at the border that we've never seen before that they're having to deal with, and I think we can do better, especially by fully funding them.
All right. Well,
so you got both sides of it,
I
right?
can tell you're passionate about that issue, and I do want to move on to a few other things that are specifically impactful to New Mexico. Now, We just have these fires going on around the state, including very recently in Ruidoso. You've had a few fires recently, and I don't want to get into the whole climate change thing, but we have federal land management. We have oil and gas permitting issues with this administration, under the control, by the way, of the former occupant of CD1, Deb Haaland, who is now in control of the
Department of
Interior.
Yes.
And so I want you to kind of flesh out how you would vote as a member of the House of Representatives on those issues. And then there's a third one, which you can dovetail in this together, water projects, which are a huge issue that the federal government deals with, and it's not a very sexy or high profile issue,
Right.
but water projects really made the American West, and they're critically important to New Mexico. So federal lands on both sides, and then the water issue.
Well, sure. We visited with firefighters in Ruidoso a few weeks ago, and I commend them for the hard work that they did. It's tough fighting fires, and if you go to my Facebook, Michelle Garcia Holmes, you'll see some of the pictures of our firefighters working in the Ruidoso area. We lost lives. It's a tough issue, and we face this every season. Our federal forestry department needs to get out there, and we need to clear our forests and make them safer, because these are just little hotspots for fires. You just never know what's going to happen. We have high winds in New Mexico, power lines go down, a fire started. We have a lot of different ways that these fires are started, but we need to start looking at ways that we can be more preventative. We need to get ahead of it. And there are a lot of things that we can do to be preventative, clearing the forest, clearing the brush on the ground, clearing the pine needles. I know Ruidoso really does take it very seriously because they lost over 200 homes, 6,000 acres. So I definitely will vote for bills that help New Mexicans be safer in these mountainous communities where we are very prone to have fires. And I think we need to get ahead of it. We need to be preventative. That's what I used to do in law enforcement. We try to be more preventative oriented because those things work. So funding for these communities, that's definitely something I'll be working on to help them. I know I talked to a few people in the community in Ruidoso where they said, we need to start burying our power lines because of the high winds that we get here. So people are actually, talking about it. And I think that's the first step. Let's talk about it, see what we can do. Let's see what we can do, what preventative, cost-effective measures we can take, and let's do it. Don't spend hours and days and weeks and months, talking about it, because in the meantime, there's still going to be fires. And,
right. Now, on the flip side of that, the environmentalists and the administration in power would say we've just got to keep oil and gas in the ground. We can't drill on federal lands. So that side of things.
So let's talk about that. When I ran against Deb Haaland, she voted for the Keep It in the Ground Act. Mm-hmm. Her Melanie Stansbury is running along the same lines, obviously, because her biggest priority is climate change. Let's think about it, folks. There is always going to be some form of climate change. We used to do a farmer's almanac. Remember back in the day, farmers would read that. Our seasons change. We go through climate changes where we're very, very dry, and then we go through El Nino, times. I think we need to be very cautious about the environment. I'm not against wind, solar, and alternative energy, nuclear energy, fusion. I'm always thinking and searching and reading things about alternative energy. But we've also got to look at New Mexico. These are our resources, and they're natural, and we need to tap into them. The oil and gas industry should be thriving here due to the fact that we actually have it. And we are operating under the toughest regulations in any other place in the world, if you think about it. So when you think about, CO2, things like that, things that our opponents are fighting for. You've got to look at it as a global issue. Look at the pollution that China's creating, India's creating. I mean, it's really a global issue where these other actors don't have the regulations that we do in America. So we're actually operating as good people in the community when we're tapping into our oil and gas and even the coal industry. If you look back to the Obama days and the regulations that he put on coal, we should not be shutting down, San Juan and looking at things like that. We should be looking at our natural resources and creating good jobs out of those arenas. These are good paying jobs. These are jobs that have supported families for many, many years. And at the same time, we do need to watch for remediation of the land and protect our lands. We've got a lot of sacred lands here as well that we need to be cautious about and make good decisions for. Common sense. I think it's always take the common sense approach when it comes to these things.
Sounds good. Now, the economy, of course, particularly inflation, is, it's not that it's awful. I mean, unemployment is really low, but inflation is really high, and federal spending has grown under both administrations, Trump and Biden, out of control. You don't have, nor will you have control of the Federal Reserve, but
No.
you will have an influence on spending and the growth of government. So let's talk about any particular programs or areas of government that need to be really constrained versus just the overall spending picture.
I believe in smaller government. I believe that, the states need to be making decisions for their citizens. Just like circling back, we were talking about our natural resources, oil and gas. When you have the government making decisions for states like ours who have all those natural resources, and it actually does affect, job losses, our economy directly. So we need a stronger voice in Washington that's going to speak up for places like New Mexico who have all these resources. Smaller government, that's what I would always lean towards, but it's New Mexico first. I've got to make sure that New Mexico is being taken care of. We've got this Federal Department of Education. To me, that's one of those bureaucracies that we probably need to start looking at and sizing down and start letting the states start to govern, what's going to happen in education. And of course, the federal government does funnel down a lot of monies to education. But what I want to make sure is that we're spending those monies properly and our kids are getting educated from those monies. For New Mexico being 50th in education, 51st if you count Washington, D.C., this is just egregious. This has been going on for years and years and years. And nothing's happening to change that. And our poor kids are suffering. The graduation rates are terrible. And so obviously the Federal Department of Education isn't really doing much to help New Mexico other than funding for Title I schools is what I see the most that's coming out of the federal government. But I'm one of those people that believes in school choice and that the money should follow the child. I raised 5 kids in this state, and all my kids, I pushed them. I pushed them to be successful. And I just want to say one other point about education, and then we'll go back to government. I think we need to do aptitude tests with kids and see what their passion is. I think that's really super important in New Mexico, especially because we're 50th. We're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to educating our kids. And the internet, that's always been something to me that's really holding back our children. They don't have access to the internet in a lot of rural New Mexico and a lot of Indian country. And promises from the Democrats, right? They've promised internet, promised this, promised that, promised better education for our kids, and they're not delivering. And that's why I always tell people, what have you got to lose voting for a Republican like me, for sure? But these are things that if you figure out what a kid's passion is, you can move them in the right direction and they will love their job for life, right? If we do aptitude tests and see where we can get our kids going to where they will get into a job market that they love, they'll stay in that job market. What we see now is a lot of job hopping because I don't think we're moving our kids in the direction of their passion. Smaller government, I think, benefits us all. And I support, people opening up their own businesses. I think that's something that we need to look at. If government's going to come in and help you, help us with small business loans. Let's promote our business community because they are one of the biggest employers of our people across America. And people have a passion for opening up businesses. But look what we did, during COVID. We lost 40 businesses, 40 people in the Albuquerque area who shut down. And where are they now? Did they leave New Mexico? I don't see the businesses coming back. We've got some of the highest unemployment rates in the country here in New Mexico. And that's just shameful with all the natural resources we have, with all the opportunities we have, with the best weather, the best food, some of the best and most friendly people. We're suffering with terrible inflation here, government dependency. I circled back to 72% of our kids are on Medicaid. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a staggering figure.
Right.
That should be scaring us right now. These numbers should be scaring us right now. And 30 trillion, our government debt, 30 trillion because of overspending. We need to stop the out of control spending in Washington, D.C. And I will always be a voice to say, look, that has to stop.
So on the Federal Department of Education, it sounded like that was something that you're inclined to limit or possibly get rid of. Okay, that's good. That's one very specific area, and I'm glad to hear that. And
I think we've talked about that before, Paul. It's just wasteful. It's wasteful federal government spending. It's a huge department. Why can't we shift those monies to our national labs, right? Wouldn't that be better to shift that spending to national labs and get some more research going in the energy area? Right. I know they're always constantly doing all sorts of things. I have two sons-in-law that work at the national labs, and they can't tell me everything, but I have some of the most interesting conversations with them. I'll tell you that.
Now, we didn't get anything specific about water.
Sure.
Just, is there anything at the federal level that you think could or should be done regarding New Mexico's water that would be beneficial to the state of New Mexico? Well,
we're a desert, right? And we have to recognize that. Years ago, some of the elected made some really good decisions with the San Juan Chama project, but that's not going to save us anymore. The drought issues are huge. We need to start looking at other resources, desalinization. We've got the oil and gas industry, and fracking does use quite a bit of water. I would like to see us start to do better research in this arena and really start having conversations about it to see what we can do about our water issues. What do we need to look at to make sure that we have water for our farming and ranchers, our farming communities and our ranchers, and for people, for us. We are a desert, and we have to recognize that. So we've got to make some good decisions in this arena. I think research is probably the best avenue to go to when it comes to water issues. When I worked at the Attorney General's office, we worked on a lot of different water issues. But that was back in 2006, and a lot of things have changed since then. We need to start researching different avenues of how we can maybe bring water to New Mexico. There are a lot of states that suffer from flooding, right? And is is there a way that we can start tapping into that somehow, diverting water to New Mexico? I know we're a long ways from some of those places, but I don't think it's harmful to start thinking about that. Look at the Keystone Pipeline.
Yep. There you go. All right. Well, we're almost to the end of this conversation, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about anything that you feel we missed. Certainly, please give out your website in any way that people can contact you, that you would like them to contact you with, and just share anything that we didn't discuss in this conversation.
Sure. Well, I want to ask the people for their vote. We have a primary election June 7th. Early voting at the convenience centers start May 20th. So I ask the voters, vote for me. You're going to be voting for a good, common sense, conservative Republican candidate, someone who's proven, effective, and experienced. And I just want to work for New Mexico. I'm retired. I've had a long career serving our community in law enforcement and serving to try and make things better for New Mexicans in the state legislature by passing laws. And I care about our kids. I have 7 grandchildren and, gave birth to 5 kids and raised them in this wonderful community. And I see New Mexico. I have a vision for New Mexico. I see New Mexico being lifted. I think we can do better, and I know we can do better in education, and that's what worries me the most. I want to see our kids have more opportunity. I want to see our borders secured. I want them to grow up in safer communities. The drug cartels are operating freely here. We see the homicide rate in Albuquerque, and it's just egregious to see, people lose their lives needlessly. Addiction, homelessness. I've worked on these issues, and I want to continue to try and help New Mexico. So I ask you to elect me and to vote for me on June 7th. You can visit my webpage to find out more information about me. It's votemgh.com. Pretty simple. It's just vote, like cast your vote, and my initials, mgh.com. And if you do have any questions, you can go to the website and hit the contact button and send questions to me, or give me a call. I'm going to give you my phone number, 505-353-0618. I hand out business cards with my personal cell because I love talking to voters and I love brainstorming with you on how we're going to make New Mexico the best place we can ever live. So I want to thank everybody for listening today, and I want to thank you, Paul, for having me on today.
Yep. Well, thank you for your time, and you're a courageous woman putting your cell phone out there. That's commendable. So that's definitely accessible and transparency in action. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube and Rumble channels. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.